Uh, so it's awesome to kind of end this. Thanks, Dana. Talking about leadership because every discussion that we've had so far was actually a leadership discussion. But to end this here with that, because I'm here in a group full of leaders. And so it's really cool to be able to do this and talk about this. And then regardless if you see yourself as a leader or you feel like you have leadership qualities, you are a leader because we have invited you to lead a portion of the body here at New Song Church. So when our staff talks about our leadership team, you guys are included in that. And it's my opinion, and I'm pretty confident that I share that opinion with the rest of our pastors and our staff and our elder team, that the small group leader, that there's not a more important role that we have. There's not a more meaningful role, there's not a more influential role, and honestly, there's not a more difficult role that we have than the role of a small group leader. So we're going to talk about 4 things tonight, how to lead and put these principles into your small group. And the first one is leading from the heart. So when we lead from the heart is really the essence of why leadership is so important in small groups. And I found this quote by A.W. Tozer, and I know Dana quoted him earlier today. This is a different one, but it was, and it's not even a leadership quote, but I believe it explains why leadership is so important in small groups. And he says this: the health of the church is in direct proportion to the health of each individual Christian. If the church is going to grow and be healthy, the individual Christians comprising the church must grow and be healthy. That's why your role is so important. Because you have leadership and influence over a portion of the individual Christians that comprise New Song Church. And that's what leadership really is. It's influence. So leading from your heart and leading with influence is really saying this, that I will care for the people that are in my group. I'm going to care for the people that walks through the doors. See, God loves his people. And oftentimes he's going to use leaders to help care for the people that he loves. And in this church, you guys are the chosen leaders where how God is going to care for the people that he loves. So at the core of small groups is really the heart of God. And so when we lead from the heart, we recognize that this is a great responsibility, but it's also a great privilege. It's a great responsibility and a great privilege that God has given us. It's not, and that's key, and I think that we really need to get this. This is a responsibility and a privilege God has given us. Taylor didn't give it to you. I didn't give it to you. Dana, Caleb didn't give it to you. This is from God. And at the core of all that God wants you to use you to care for his people. But first, before you can care and love someone, before you can lead someone, they actually have to give you the privilege to do so. So how do we do that? That's how we lead from the heart. Because one of the biggest things that people ask is this: does anybody care about me? And does anybody notice me? Those are the 2 questions. And when we're leading from the heart, we're saying, small group leader, I'll take that job. I'll see you. I'll notice you. Does anyone care for me? Does anyone notice about me? Now, it might become second nature for a lot of us that if someone misses a small group or 2, that we're going to pick up the phone, we're going to call them, and we're going to check on them and see how they're doing. And we should. But what might not be second nature is actually picking up the phone and checking on the person that is there every week. Checking on the person that doesn't have the prayer request, that seems like everything is just going really smooth in their world. But those people need your leadership too. They need to know that you care about them too. Because a lot of times they may not even speak up, because even if they have something inside that's going in their world and they're struggling, but they may be quiet because the prayer request that was just asked right before, in comparison, what they have is so insignificant. So they don't speak up. That's why it's important to lead them too. And we look to Jesus as the model of being a shepherd. But the warning here is this, is that we don't want those people to continue to lean on you too much. Because we're shepherds in their lives, but we don't want ever to take away the role of shepherd that Jesus has in their life. See, in our shepherding, in our leading, in our caring for people, we want to do is we want to direct them to Jesus. We want to direct them to Christ. That's why leadership is so important. To being a small group leader, we have zero interest, absolutely no interest of being the hero of anybody's story. Our job is to lead them so Jesus can be the hero of their story. That's leading from the heart. Getting to know the people in your group, knowing how they spend their time, knowing what's important to them. Watch how they respond to different conversation and topics in your group, just noticing them. So your job isn't to be the spiritual policeman of their lives. Your goal is to just know how to best love them. And yet to best love them, you have to actually know them. And you notice these things about them. And oftentimes they won't even know that you're actually paying that much attention to them. But the good thing is that we need to know that you're not leading just a group. You're leading a group of individuals, of individual people with individual personalities, with individual problems and individual pasts and hurts and brokenness and celebrations and joy. And everybody, they need to know that you care. So when we lead from the heart, we're really saying, if it's important to them, small group leader, can you make it important to you? And the way we can do that is number 2 is really leading with compassion, caring for God's people, shepherding and servant leadership. John Maxwell has a great quote, adding value to people is essential. It's the core of leadership. What if we looked at our group and said, how can I add value to this person? Jesus is the ultimate shepherd, and he set the example as a leader who always had compassion for his people, for his followers, even when it was most inconvenient. And Dana talked about this earlier, but we know as small group leaders, we already know this, that the needs of people don't always come at the most convenient time. And we look at the book of Matthew. Jesus was withdrawing because he wanted some time alone. He was grieving. He just got the news that John the Baptist was dead. And he couldn't escape the crowds, even though he tried. When Jesus heard about it, he withdrew from there by boat to a remote place to be alone. And when the crowds heard this, they followed him on foot from the towns. When he went ashore, he saw a large crowd. He had compassion on them and healed their sick. Even though Jesus had every right to just say, I need some alone time. I'm grieving, I'm hurting, I'm struggling. I want to be alone. He could have done that, but he didn't. And so many times as a small group leader, we're going to have members of our group that's going to call on us in the most inopportune moment and outside that hour and a half on a Wednesday night. Because we know that hardships and sickness and pain in real life, those things don't have office hours. And a lot of times, they're going to come to you when you have had a bad day. But we look at Jesus as the role model and say that I'm here to serve them. I'm here to love them, and I'm here to care for them. And so that might be a late night phone call. That could be a hey, can I stay a little late for after group because I want to unpack some things with you. I'm coming to church and I'm going to grab you and I want to talk to you in the lobby when you really just want to go and worship. Lord, help us. Someone wants to move. And you're going to have to help them do that. A lot of times being a small group leader is just that. It's inconvenient. But we're going to lead with passion and compassion. And we're going to have that in our mindset because the truth is that every person that walks through your door, every person that enters your small group could be fighting a battle that you know nothing about. And you want to know about that. But how can I have compassion on someone if I don't know the battle they're fighting? They'll tell you. They'll tell you when they know one thing, and that one thing is this, that you care about them. That's when they're going to open up. And Dana hit on this a little bit, and I just love this analogy where a simple text to someone who just out of the blue, someone that maybe doesn't have a prayer request, that some just, hey, I just wanted you to know I'm thinking about you, praying for you this morning. Have a great day. You know the emotional deposit you just made in their bank account? It's huge. Someone thought about me today. Someone cared for me today. Someone prayed for me today. Because the thing is when you're struggling and when you're hurting and when you're in the middle of the storm, the thing that hurts the most is the silence from the people that care about you. And so we are there, and we can't do it all. We can't do it all. It's not our responsibility to do it all. But we can say, I care for this person. I see this person. And when we do that, we fulfill the Philippians 2 where we consider others more important than yourself. So how do we lead with compassion? How can we add value to someone? And I'm really short on time, so I'm going to zip through this a little bit. Leading in from the front, basically setting the example for your group. What's the hardest part of your small group? You're sitting around in the home, and all of a sudden, you're your leader, and you ask a question. And this question may prompt some vulnerability. So you ask the question, and then there's silence. We've all been there. And there's going to continue to be silence until you become vulnerable enough to set the lead. You set the atmosphere. They're going to be vulnerable with you once they see you. That's leading from the front. You model the behavior. You want your group to be open and transparent, then be open and transparent. You want your group to value serving, then serve them and let them see you doing that. Leading from the front doesn't mean dictating direction. People don't want to follow a dictator, or they're going to do it reluctantly. What they want is someone that helps them spiritually grow. That person that maybe just accepted Christ and doesn't have really a deep understanding of how to pray, well, they're going to learn that by listening to you pray. And they're going to see you and hear you do some things. That's leading from the front. And lastly, we're going to talk leading sacrificially. Willing to lay down your life for someone else. Because the truth is, and you all know this in this room, that if you've been small group leader for any time, there is a cost to being a small group leader. But everything worthwhile has a cost. There's going to be time when leading your group is just a sacrifice. Small group leader, host home leader, it's a tough job, and as a host home leader, the sacrifice could be, I gotta, just like Amber was talking about, I gotta open up my home and every week, and I gotta make sure there's food, and I'm going to clean the house, and I'm going to create this environment every single week. That's your sacrifice. For leaders, it's setting the tone. It's being vulnerable and talking. It's caring for everybody around and checking on them once in a while, and that is work. It's a sacrifice. It's work, but it's worthy work. And why is it a sacrifice? Because there's people in your group. And people are work. But it's so worth it. It is so worth it. When it seemed like it's getting hard, when you go to your group and nobody's engaged, nobody's talking, and you got someone in there that may be trying to create a division in your group, and nobody is showing up sometimes, and it's work, and you're praying for them, you're checking on them, and they're not responding, and there's so many different things, and you wonder, is it even worth it? It is worth it. It is worth it. Are you willing to be inconvenienced for a bunch of needy people? I read this book not too long ago. It was called Make Your Bed. And it was written by a retired admiral in the U.S. Navy, and he outlines 10 things that if you do this will change your life. And the last thing he outlined was, don't ever ring the bell. I stood at attention along with another 150 students beginning the first day of SEAL training. The instructor, dressed in combat boots, khaki shorts, and a blue and gold t-shirt, walked across the large asphalt courtyard to a brass bell hanging in full view of the trainees. "Gentlemen," he said, "today is the first day of SEAL training. For the next 6 months, you will undergo the toughest course of instruction in the United States military." And I glanced around and I could see the looks of apprehension on the faces of my fellow students. And then he said, "You're going to be tested like no time in your life. Most of you will not make it through. I will see to that. I will do everything in my power to make you quit." And he emphasized those last words, "make you quit." "I will harass you unmercifully. I will embarrass you in front of your teammates. I will push you beyond your limits." And then a slight grin went across his face, and there's going to be pain, lots of pain. And then he grabbed the bell, and he pulled the rope hard, and the loud clanging noise echoed across the courtyard. And he goes, "But if you don't like the pain, if you don't like the harassment, if you want an easy way out," then he pulled the rope again, and the bell sounded across the whole building. "All you have to do is ring this bell. That's all you have to do. Ring this bell, and you don't have to get up early. Ring this bell, and you won't have to do the long runs, the cold swims, the obstacle course. Ring this bell, and you can avoid all the pain." But then the instructor kind of glanced down, and he seemed to break from his prepared monologue, and he says this, "But let me tell you something. If you quit, you're going to regret it for the rest of your life." Small group ministry is a sacrifice. It's difficult. People are difficult. But that's why you have a title of small group leader, because that's what it takes, leadership. And there'll be times when you may feel like ringing that bell. There's going to be times when you feel like quitting, because what happens, you can ring that bell, you don't have to have people over tonight. You can ring that bell, you don't have to sacrifice another evening. Ring the bell, you won't have to have that feeling of disappointment for that person that you've been praying for every single week, and finally they gave you their word that they're going to show up to your small group, and then you're there and they don't. Ring the bell, and you won't have to deal with people in your group telling you maybe how you should be leading it a little bit better. Ring the bell, and you don't have to sacrifice something else that's important to you that night just so you can keep your commitment to your small group, and then nobody else shows. Ring the bell, and those times when people just seem disengaged, you got that person that will not speak no matter how much you get them trying. And then you got the other person, no matter how hard you try to move the conversation over, they could be the small group themselves. Ring the bell, and you can avoid all of that. And I know these are real feelings because I'm a small group leader too, and I've had every single one of them. And there's times I wanted to ring the bell. But how many times do people quit right before the breakthrough? Right before the miracle is about to happen, right before God's going to do something beautiful, and he's going to use you guys to do it. Those times when you pray over the empty chair and God fills it with someone. He fills it with someone that doesn't have anybody or anything, and all of a sudden they come to your group and their life is transformed. They come those times when someone walks in and all of a sudden their life is falling apart and they break down in front of you. They have no hope. They have no answers. But then God uses you to have this divine answer for them. And they leave your group encouraged and filled up. You're going to ring that bell, and you're going to miss those times when people say, "You remember that friend that I kept praying for, that we kept praying for as a group? They accepted Jesus this week. Remember that friend that we've been praying for? He's going to be there on Sunday." Ring that bell, and you're going to miss that phone call from someone in your group that says, "I have nobody else to talk to. But I can use a friend. I can use some wisdom. I can use prayer." And they chose you to fill that role in their critical time in their life. What an honor, what a privilege. All these things. Ring the bell, and you won't be able to sit with your small group on a Sunday morning and watch someone in your group get baptized. And you weep as they go down in the water, and you celebrate with them afterwards. Every one of those things happened in this church through this ministry. And that's what you're giving up. It's worth it. It's worth the pain. It's worth the struggle. It's worth the hours. It's worth the commitment. The fruit of ministry is this: a healthy church full of healthy people. You can go right back to Tozer's quote that we started with. The health of a church is in direct proportion to the health of each individual Christian. If the church is going to grow and be healthy, the individual Christians comprising the church must grow and be healthy. This church, one more minute. Taylor and I and Dana and Adele, Caleb, we get statistics sometimes. We can hear from other churches locally. We hear other churches nationally. I'm not going to tell you everything that happened the last 6 months. You know that. You knew the churches are closed. We know everything that's going on. And the reports that we're getting back is the re-engagement back in the church is about 20, 30%. People are in their weeds. People are out and just kind of doing what they do. They're lost, they're broken, and they've given up a lot. 20 to 30%. That's not happening here. Grace of God. It's not happening here. And I'll tell you why I believe it's not happening here. A lot of prayer, one. But two, what are the questions that people want to know, especially during this last 6 months? Does somebody care about me? Does somebody notice me? The answer to their question in this church is yes, and it's because of you guys. The Zoom meetings that you're willing to have, the calls that you were willing to give during this time. I'm just checking on you, just checking on your family. That doesn't happen everywhere. It happened here. That's why this is so important. That's why this is the most important role we have, is the people that are sitting in this room tonight. And this is why I believe it helped save this church through a 6 month of a crisis. This, coupled with prayer ministry, is the most important thing that we do in this church. So for what you guys do, thank you. Because we're trusting you with a portion of this church to steward, to care for, and to shepherd. The most meaningful thing you can do.